in a modest, run-down neighborhood, where the buildings seemed to lean on each other for support, young Maya, a bright-eyed girl with rich brown skin and tightly curled hair, wandered the streets with curiosity. The streets were filled with the hum of life. Kids playing, mothers calling out from stoops, and the distant blare of sirens that had become part of the neighborhood's background noise. Maya, however, always noticed the tension that lingered under the surface. She was no stranger to the injustices her community faced, even though she was still a child. Her father, a hard-working mechanic, often came home tired, not just from the labor, but from battling the judgment that came with the color of his skin. Her mother, a cashier at the local grocery store, always had a kind word for the customers, but would often share stories at the dinner table about how people treated her differently, as if she was invisible or less capable. Maya's sharp mind absorbed everything around her, and it didn't take long for her to realize that these problems weren't just coincidences. They were the product of a much larger issue. It was when she saw her uncle, a kind man who had always supported her dreams, get arrested on false charges that Maya felt something shift inside her. Watching him, a man she admired, be humiliated and handcuffed for a crime he didn't commit filled her with a sense of helplessness and anger. It was in that moment that Maya decided she wasn't going to sit by and watch her family and friends be treated like this. She was going to fight back. From then on, Maya became obsessed with justice. She spent countless afternoons at the local library, reading everything she could about laws, famous trials, and civil rights movements. The legal books she could barely lift became her escape from the harsh reality outside her door. With every story of lawyers standing up against injustice, Maya's dream grew stronger. She envisioned herself in courtrooms, defending the wrongfully accused, fighting for those who couldn't fight for themselves. Though her school was underfunded and often lacked resources, Maya's teachers couldn't deny her potential. She was intelligent, driven, and passionate. But even in school, the racial barriers became evident. Many of her classmates who looked like her were encouraged to take vocational tracks, while others, those with lighter skin, were pushed towards academic success. Maya could see it happening around her, but she wouldn't let it happen to her. Every time a teacher hinted that she should be more realistic about her future, it only fueled her ambition. At home, her parents, though supportive, were cautious. They had seen too many dreams crushed by the weight of reality. "Maya," her mother would say gently, "the world isn't kind to girls like you. You've got to be smart, but don't expect things to be fair." Maya nodded, understanding the weight of her mother's words, but inside, she refused to accept it. She believed in something greater. She believed that she could make a difference. That dream, though still fragile and young, became her guiding star. With every passing year, Maya grew more determined, convinced that the law was her calling. It wasn't just about getting a good job or proving herself to the world. It was about changing the system that had treated her family so unfairly. As the years went by, Maya would carry that spark with her through every challenge, every obstacle that came her way. She knew that the road to becoming a lawyer, especially for someone like her, wouldn't be easy. But as she sat by her window at night, looking out at the dark streets of her neighborhood, she whispered to herself, "I'll make it. I'll be the one to fight for us." Maya's dream to become a lawyer never wavered, but as she entered high school, the challenges she faced became more apparent. Her school was underfunded, with outdated textbooks and overcrowded classrooms. While her teachers recognized her potential, many saw her ambition as unrealistic. "Law school is expensive, Maya," they'd say. "Maybe you should consider something more practical." But Maya didn't let their doubts shake her. In a predominantly white school, Maya stood out. Her dark brown skin, tightly coiled hair, and full lips set her apart from her peers. She noticed the way teachers paid more attention to certain students, especially those who didn't look like her. Maya's grades were excellent, but she had to fight for recognition, always feeling like she had to work twice as hard just to be seen. There were times when Maya's spirit faltered. One afternoon, she stayed after school to ask for help with a legal essay from her history teacher, Mr. Jenkins. He was known for being harsh, but Maya admired his knowledge of the law. However, when she approached him with her questions, he didn't even glance up from his desk. "Mr. Jenkins, can you help me with this case study?" she asked, holding her notebook tightly. Without looking at her, he muttered, "Maya, law isn't really a field for everyone. Have you thought about something else? Maybe social work?" Maya's heart sank, but she refused to show it. Instead, she nodded politely and walked away. The frustration burned inside her. Why did they always assume she was meant for something else? Was it her skin color? Her background? At home, she confided in her parents, who were always supportive. Her father, wiping the grease from his hands after a long day at the shop, would tell her, "You've got to keep going, Maya. They'll try to push you down, but you've got to stand tall. You've got something they can't take from you, your mind." Maya listened, absorbing his words, but the challenges grew. Her family couldn't afford the private tutoring that many of her classmates had access to, and although her grades were excellent, the path to college and then law school felt more daunting with every passing day. The financial burden loomed large. Despite this, Maya applied to colleges determined to find a way. Rejections came, not because of her grades, but because she couldn't afford the tuition. Eventually, she earned a scholarship to a local university, one that wasn't her first choice but gave her the opportunity to pursue her dream. At university, things didn't get much easier. The legal courses were challenging, and once again, she found herself in classrooms where she was one of the few black students. Professors, though polite, often ignored her in discussions. Her classmates rarely invited her to study groups. The loneliness was suffocating. One night, after a particularly grueling week of exams, Maya sat in the library, her head in her hands, fighting back tears. She had studied harder than anyone, but the grades didn't reflect her effort. Was this how it was always going to be? Fighting, pushing, and never getting the results she deserved? Just as the tears threatened to spill over, she remembered her uncle's wrongful arrest, her father's encouraging words, and her community's struggles. She wasn't just doing this for herself. She was doing it for all of them. Maya straightened her back, wiped her face, and pushed through the exhaustion. Through sheer grit, Maya began to excel. She spent late nights in the library, weekends researching case law, and formed connections with a few professors who believed in her potential. Slowly but surely, she started to stand out, not just as the only black woman in her classes, but as one of the brightest minds. Her journey was far from over, but Maya knew one thing for sure. She wasn't going to let the system beat her. She had come too far to turn back now. Graduating from university was one of Maya's proudest moments. She had defied the odds, walked across that stage, and earned her law degree. Her family beamed with pride, her father's eyes glistening with unshed tears as he clapped the loudest in the crowd. But Maya knew that the real challenges were just beginning. The legal world was competitive and harsh, especially for someone like her. Maya applied to countless law firms in her city, determined to land a position at a reputable practice. But interview after interview, she was met with thinly veiled skepticism. Sitting in one posh office, she faced 3 senior partners, a panel of older white men in tailored suits. They scrutinized her resume, their faces betraying little. Maya wore her best suit, her natural hair styled into a neat twist-out. But as the interview progressed, she could feel their doubts lingering in the air. "So," one of the partners said, tapping his pen on her application. "You graduated from a decent university, but we usually prefer candidates from Ivy League schools. Why should we take a chance on you?" Maya took a deep breath. "I may not have gone to an Ivy League, but my experience and dedication to the law are undeniable. I've worked on pro bono cases, interned with legal aid organizations, and have a deep commitment to social justice. I know I can bring fresh perspectives and hard work to your firm." The partners exchanged glances, their expressions unreadable. "We'll be in touch," one of them said flatly, and Maya knew what that meant. Weeks passed and rejections piled up. The reasons were always vague. "We've decided to go in another direction," or "We're looking for someone with more experience." But Maya couldn't help but wonder if her race and gender played a part in their decisions. The legal field, like much of society, wasn't built for people like her. Despite the setbacks, Maya found a small firm willing to take her on. It wasn't prestigious, and the pay was modest, but it was a start. At her new job, the challenges were different but no less significant. She was the only black attorney in the firm, and many of her colleagues didn't hide their condescension. One day, Maya found herself in the break room, preparing for a big case. Her white male colleague Derek entered, glancing at her notes. "You know, Maya," he said with a smirk, "this case is pretty complicated. Are you sure you can handle it?" Maya bristled but kept her composure. "I've been preparing for weeks, Derek. I'm confident I can." "Well, just don't mess it up. This client is important to the firm," he said, walking away with an air of superiority. These moments became routine. Every success Maya achieved was met with doubt. Every failure scrutinized more harshly than her peers. But she pressed on, determined not to let their prejudice break her spirit. Her first major case was a difficult one. It involved a landlord who had been evicting low-income tenants illegally, many of whom were people of color. The case was high stakes, and Maya felt the weight of her community's hopes on her shoulders. In the courtroom, Maya faced a seasoned defense attorney who seemed to relish undermining her. During cross-examination, he spoke to her condescendingly, treating her like an inexperienced rookie. But Maya was prepared. She had studied every detail, anticipated every argument. When it was her turn to present, she spoke with clarity and conviction, refusing to be intimidated. As the case drew to a close, Maya stood before the jury, her heart pounding but her voice steady. "This isn't just about a legal dispute," she said, looking each juror in the eye. "This is about justice. It's about standing up for those who can't stand up for themselves. The law exists to protect the vulnerable. And today, you have the power to uphold that principle." The jury deliberated for hours, and when they returned, Maya held her breath. The verdict was in her favor. The tenants would not be evicted, and the landlord was ordered to pay restitution. It was a small victory in the grand scheme of things, but for Maya, it was a monumental step. She had proven to herself and to her doubters that she belonged in this profession. Maya's victory in court had ignited a fire within her. It wasn't just about winning a case. It was about what that victory represented. She had stood up not only for her clients, but also for herself, proving that she was more than capable of navigating the legal world, no matter how many obstacles were placed in her way. But as rewarding as the win was, Maya knew this was just the beginning of her fight for justice. The buzz from her victory brought more attention her way, and with that came more challenging cases. Soon, Maya was handling cases involving police brutality, wrongful convictions, and systemic discrimination. The cases were tough, emotionally draining, and sometimes overwhelming. But every time she stepped into a courtroom, she was reminded of the people she was fighting for. One case, in particular, would change everything. It was a civil rights case involving a black teenager, Darius, who had been wrongfully accused of robbery. The evidence was flimsy at best, but the boy had been targeted by the police because of his race, and his family couldn't afford a high-priced lawyer. Maya took on the case, knowing how high the stakes were. Meeting Darius for the first time, Maya saw herself in him. He was scared, frustrated, and unsure if he could trust a system that had already failed him. As they sat in her office, Maya explained the legal process, trying to reassure him. "Look, Darius," she said, her voice calm but firm. "I've seen this happen too many times, but I'm going to fight for you. I'm not going to let them take your future from you without a fight." Darius nodded, though the fear in his eyes remained. Maya knew what that fear felt like. It was the same fear she had battled every day since she started her career. But fear wouldn't stop her, and she wouldn't let it stop Darius. The case was intense, with the prosecution pushing hard to convict Darius despite the lack of solid evidence. Maya poured everything she had into the defense, working late nights, combing through police reports, finding witnesses, and building a narrative that showed Darius's innocence. Every time she walked into the courtroom, she felt the weight of the case pressing down on her. But she refused to let it break her. One afternoon, after a particularly grueling day in court, Maya sat in her office, exhausted. The weight of the responsibility was almost too much to bear. But as she looked at a photo of her family on her desk, her mother, father, and younger brother, all beaming with pride, she found the strength to keep going. In the courtroom, the trial reached its climax. Maya's cross-examination of the arresting officer was the pivotal moment. She could sense the officer's discomfort as she pressed him on the inconsistencies in his testimony. "Officer," Maya said, her voice steady, "you stated that you apprehended Darius because he matched the description of the suspect, correct?" The officer shifted uncomfortably. "Yes, that's correct." "And what was the description given to you?" "Black male, around 5 feet 10 inches, wearing a hoodie." Maya glanced at Darius, then back at the officer. "So, essentially you stopped him because he was a young black man wearing a hoodie. Is that correct?" The officer's silence was deafening. The courtroom was tense, and Maya could feel the weight of everyone's eyes on her. But she pressed on, undeterred. "You had no other evidence linking him to the crime. No DNA, no fingerprints, nothing. Yet you arrested him. Why?" The officer fumbled for a response, but it was clear that the prosecution's case was unraveling. When the trial finally ended, the jury's verdict was clear. Darius was acquitted of all charges. Relief washed over Maya as she hugged Darius and his family. It wasn't just a victory for her. It was a victory for justice. And it was the moment that solidified her reputation as a force to be reckoned with in the legal world. Word spread about Maya's triumph, and soon she became known as the lawyer who took on the system and won. But for Maya, it wasn't about fame or recognition. It was about making sure that no one else had to suffer the way Darius had. It was about fighting for a better world, one case at a time. After her victory in Darius's case, Maya's name became synonymous with justice. Her phone wouldn't stop ringing. Calls from potential clients, media outlets, and even civil rights organizations, all wanting to collaborate with her. It felt surreal, but Maya wasn't one to get swept up in the fame. She knew that with the recognition came greater responsibility, and she wasn't about to let her newfound platform go to waste. Still, the shift in her life was undeniable. She went from being the overlooked attorney to the rising star of her community, a beacon of hope for those who had been wronged by the system. People now looked to her not only as a lawyer, but also as a leader. The pressure was intense, but Maya was determined to rise to the challenge. Despite the growing workload, Maya made sure to stay grounded. She continued visiting her mother's home every weekend, sitting in the kitchen and drinking tea while they talked about the changes in her life. Her mother, always the supportive figure, would listen intently, offering wisdom and encouragement. "You're making us proud, Maya," her mother would say, her eyes full of love. "But don't forget to take care of yourself in all of this." Maya would nod, though she rarely slowed down. Every new case felt like another battle in the war against injustice, and Maya couldn't rest while there was still work to be done. Her reputation continued to grow when she took on a new high-profile case. This time, a group lawsuit against a major corporation accused of discriminating against black employees. The case was massive, involving hundreds of plaintiffs and a mountain of evidence. But Maya didn't shy away from the challenge. Working long hours with her team, she pored over documents, piecing together a case that would be hard to refute. As the trial date approached, Maya found herself in unfamiliar territory. On the front pages of major newspapers, being interviewed on television, and even receiving hate mail. It was a stark reminder that success came with a price. One evening, while working late in her office, Maya received a call from a prominent civil rights leader who had been following her career closely. "Maya," the voice on the other end said, "I want you to know that what you're doing is important. More important than you may realize. You're inspiring an entire generation of young black women to believe that they can succeed even when the world tells them they can't." Maya was silent for a moment, absorbing the weight of those words. She had always known her work was important, but hearing it framed in such a way was humbling. It made her realize that her success wasn't just her own. It belonged to every woman who had been told she wasn't enough. As the case against the corporation unfolded, Maya once again found herself facing overwhelming odds. The defense was well-funded, with top-tier lawyers and endless resources at their disposal. But Maya didn't back down. She rallied her team, reminding them of the stakes. This wasn't just about winning a case. It was about sending a message that discrimination, no matter how deeply embedded in corporate culture, would not go unchallenged. The trial itself was grueling, with weeks of testimonies, cross-examinations, and heated debates. Maya could feel the exhaustion setting in, but she pushed through, knowing that the outcome would have far-reaching consequences for the plaintiffs and their families. In the courtroom, Maya commanded attention with her poise and passion. Her arguments were sharp, her cross-examinations precise. Every day, she fought with everything she had, determined to expose the truth. The jury listened, captivated by her relentless pursuit of justice. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, the verdict was in. The corporation was found guilty of systemic discrimination, and the plaintiffs were awarded a substantial settlement. Maya had done it again. She had taken on a seemingly insurmountable opponent and won. The courtroom erupted in cheers, but Maya stood quietly, absorbing the magnitude of what had just happened. It wasn't just a victory for her clients. It was a victory for every person who had ever been overlooked, dismissed, or mistreated because of the color of their skin. As she left the courtroom that day, Maya couldn't help but think of all the battles that still lay ahead. But for now, this victory was enough. After winning the case against the corporation, Maya's name became even more prominent in legal circles. She had become a symbol of hope for marginalized communities, and her victories were seen as more than just personal success. They were a direct challenge to the status quo. Yet, despite all her accomplishments, Maya knew that the real change she sought would not come solely from winning cases. It would come from transforming the system itself. Maya began speaking at conferences and universities, using her platform to advocate for systemic reform. Her speeches were powerful, drawing large crowds of young lawyers, activists, and community leaders. She spoke about the need for a legal system that served everyone, regardless of race, gender, or economic status. She also addressed the deep-rooted biases that had shaped her own experiences in the legal world. During one of her talks at a prestigious law school, a young black woman approached her afterward, visibly emotional. "You inspired me to keep going," the woman said, her voice shaky. "I was ready to give up. Law school has been so hard, and I didn't think there was a place for someone like me in this field. But seeing you up there, it gave me hope." Maya smiled, recognizing her own struggles in the woman's words. "There's always a place for you," she said, resting a hand on the woman's shoulder. "The system may try to make you feel small, but don't let it. You're exactly what this field needs." These moments reminded Maya of why she had started this journey. It wasn't just about winning cases. It was about inspiring the next generation to believe in their own power to create change. As Maya's influence grew, she began to work on legislative efforts aimed at addressing police brutality and racial discrimination. She teamed up with lawmakers, civil rights organizations, and community leaders, crafting bills that would hold law enforcement and corporations accountable for discriminatory practices. One evening, as Maya was reviewing a draft of a police reform bill with her team, she received a call from a senator who had been pushing the bill forward. "Maya," the senator said, "we're making progress, but there's a lot of resistance. We need your voice now more than ever." Maya sighed, feeling the weight of the situation. The opposition was fierce, but she had never been one to back down. "I'll do whatever it takes," she replied firmly. "This can't wait any longer." She threw herself into the work, organizing meetings, giving interviews, and rallying public support. It was exhausting, and there were moments when Maya questioned whether the system could truly be changed. But every time she saw the impact her efforts were having, whether it was a conversation sparked by one of her speeches or a protest fueled by the energy of a movement she had helped inspire, she knew it was worth it. The months that followed were a whirlwind of advocacy and action. Maya worked tirelessly to ensure the bills she helped shape would pass, all while maintaining her law practice. Her cases continued, each one a new opportunity to fight against injustice. But now, her fight was twofold. She was battling in the courtroom and in the halls of government, determined to dismantle the structures that allowed discrimination to thrive. Finally, the day came when one of the bills she had championed, focused on police accountability, was brought to a vote. Maya watched from the gallery as lawmakers debated the bill. Her heart raced as the final votes were tallied. When the bill passed, Maya felt a wave of emotion wash over her. She had done it. She had taken the pain of her past and used it to change the future. But Maya knew this was only the beginning. There was still so much work to be done. The system was vast, and real change would take years, maybe even decades. But now, she had allies in the fight, and her voice carried weight. She was no longer the underestimated lawyer from a poor neighborhood. She was a force of change, reshaping the very system that had tried to silence her. As she left the legislative building that evening, Maya looked up at the sky, the city lights twinkling around her. The journey had been long, and it was far from over. But for the first time in a long time, she allowed herself to feel a sense of accomplishment. She was changing the system, one case, one law, one victory at a time. With the passage of the Police Accountability Bill, Maya had cemented her place as a transformative figure in the world of civil rights. The bill was a major victory, not just for her, but for countless families who had lost loved ones to police brutality, and for communities that had lived in fear of those meant to protect them. Yet, Maya was acutely aware that the battle was far from over. Her success had come at a cost. The long hours, relentless pressure, and emotional weight of the cases she took on had started to take a toll. Maya often found herself working late into the night, poring over case files and policy documents while the rest of the world slept. She had become a pillar of hope for so many people, but she couldn't shake the feeling that she was carrying the weight of a nation's pain on her shoulders. One evening, after an exhausting day in court and back-to-back meetings with advocacy groups, Maya sat in her office, staring at a stack of letters on her desk. They were from people all over the country, victims of racial discrimination, families of police violence victims, young lawyers seeking her guidance. Each letter was a story of struggle, hope, and a desire for justice. Maya felt an overwhelming sense of responsibility. As she read through one letter in particular, tears welled in her eyes. It was from a mother who had lost her son to police violence. The woman wrote about how Maya's work had given her the strength to keep fighting, even after her own attempts to seek justice had failed. She thanked Maya for not giving up and for being a voice for those who had been silenced. Maya folded the letter carefully, placing it back in the envelope. This was why she kept going. Despite the exhaustion, despite the seemingly insurmountable challenges, she knew she couldn't stop. Too many people were depending on her. But Maya also realized that she couldn't do it alone. She had been fighting these battles for years, but the fight needed more than just one voice. It needed a movement. And so, Maya began mentoring the next generation of lawyers and activists, passing on everything she had learned. She wanted to ensure that when the time came for her to step back, the work would continue without her. One of her mentors was a young black lawyer named David, who reminded her of herself when she was starting out, determined, passionate, but also deeply frustrated by the injustices he saw around him. Maya took him under her wing, guiding him through difficult cases and teaching him how to navigate the often hostile world of law. "You have to be stronger than the system," she told him during one of their late-night strategy sessions. "The system will try to break you, make you feel like you don't belong. But you do, and you're exactly what it needs." Under Maya's mentorship, David flourished. He began taking on cases of his own, using the skills Maya had taught him to fight for marginalized communities. Watching him grow as a lawyer filled Maya with a sense of pride and hope. It was clear to her now that the legacy she would leave behind wasn't just in the cases she won, but in the people she inspired. As Maya continued her work, she also began laying the groundwork for a larger initiative, an organization that would provide legal aid to those who couldn't afford it and offer mentorship to young lawyers from underrepresented communities. The organization, which she named the Justice Initiative, became her passion project. It was a way for her to extend her impact beyond the courtroom and ensure that future generations would have the support they needed to fight for justice. The Justice Initiative quickly gained traction, attracting support from civil rights organizations and prominent figures in the legal world. Maya's vision was becoming a reality, and it gave her a renewed sense of purpose. One afternoon, as she sat in a meeting with her board of directors, finalizing plans for the launch of the initiative, Maya looked around the room at the diverse group of people she had brought together. Lawyers, activists, community leaders, each of them committed to the cause of justice. She smiled to herself, realizing that this was what she had been working toward all along. It wasn't just about the battles she had fought. It was about the legacy she was building. As the meeting ended and people began filing out, David approached her, holding a small plaque. "We wanted to give you this," he said, handing it to her. Maya looked down at the plaque. It read, "In honor of Maya Anderson, a warrior for justice and an inspiration to us all." She felt a lump in her throat as she read the words. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. David smiled. "No, thank you for everything." Maya looked around the room once more, taking in the faces of the people she had mentored and worked with. This was her legacy. People fighting for a better world, for justice, for change. And in that moment, she knew that no matter how difficult the road had been, it had all been worth it. As the sun began to rise over the city, casting a warm glow through the window of her office, Maya took a moment to reflect. The past years had been a whirlwind of challenges and triumphs, but now she was standing at the threshold of something new. The Justice Initiative was officially launching that evening with a gala event, and the anticipation filled her with excitement and nervous energy. Maya had put her heart and soul into this initiative. It wasn't just a legal organization. It was a movement aimed at dismantling systemic barriers and empowering those who had long been silenced. She had invited community leaders, activists, and supporters from all walks of life to come together and celebrate the beginning of this new chapter. Throughout the day, Maya moved from meeting to meeting, finalizing arrangements for the gala. She reviewed the guest list, ensuring that people from marginalized communities were prominently featured. This was their night as much as it was hers, and she wanted everyone to feel included and valued. As the evening approached, she stood in front of the mirror, adjusting her dress, a simple yet elegant black gown. She wanted to look polished, but also relatable. This night was not just about her. It was about the community that had rallied behind her and the future they were building together. When she arrived at the venue, the atmosphere was electric. The hall was beautifully decorated, with banners celebrating justice and equality adorning the walls. A diverse crowd buzzed with excitement, the room filled with laughter and chatter. Maya felt a sense of pride wash over her. This was the culmination of years of hard work and sacrifice. As the event commenced, Maya took a deep breath and stepped onto the stage. The applause that erupted was overwhelming. She looked out at the sea of faces, many familiar, some new, and felt a surge of gratitude. These were the people she had fought for, the ones who had supported her every step of the way. "Thank you all for being here tonight," she began, her voice steady but filled with emotion. "This is more than just a celebration. It's a declaration of our commitment to justice. Together, we are creating a space where everyone has the opportunity to thrive, regardless of their background." As she spoke, Maya shared stories of individuals who had been impacted by the Justice Initiative, highlighting their journeys and resilience. Each story was a testament to the strength of the community and the importance of fighting against injustice. The evening continued with heartfelt speeches from community leaders, a silent auction to raise funds for the initiative, and performances by local artists. Each moment was a reminder of the power of unity and the collective strength of those who had gathered. Later in the evening, Maya took a moment to step outside for some fresh air. The city skyline sparkled against the night sky, and she felt a sense of peace wash over her. It was a beautiful night, a perfect reflection of the hope she felt for the future. As she stood there, David joined her, leaning against the railing beside her. "You did it, Maya. This is incredible," he said, his voice filled with admiration. Maya smiled, looking at the bustling scene behind them. "We did it. It's all of us together." David nodded. "What's next for you? More cases? More fights?" Maya paused, considering the question. "I think my focus will shift a bit. I want to make sure the Justice Initiative is on solid ground and that we're reaching as many people as possible. But I'll always be here to fight when I'm needed." As they continued to talk, Maya felt a deep sense of fulfillment. She had come a long way from that young girl in a poor neighborhood dreaming of becoming a lawyer. Now, she was leading a movement, changing lives, and inspiring others to do the same. When the night came to a close, Maya felt a profound sense of gratitude. The event had not only been a success, it had reinforced her belief in the power of community and the importance of perseverance. As she looked around at the people dancing, laughing, and sharing stories, she knew that this was just the beginning. In the months that followed, the Justice Initiative flourished. It provided legal assistance to those in need, hosted workshops, and cultivated a new generation of leaders. Maya's vision was becoming a reality, and she was finally able to step back and watch as others carried the torch forward. Maya knew that the journey would continue to have its challenges, but she felt a renewed sense of hope. The fight for justice was ongoing, and she was proud to be part of a community that refused to back down. As she looked toward the horizon, she felt ready to embrace whatever came next. The dawn of a new era was upon them, and Maya was excited to be a part of it.